All right, somebody I've never had on the podcast before. Jesse, I know him as the Body Ventura, but he is going to be returning to NBC, WWE Saturday Night's Main Event, returning to broadcast television Saturday, December 14th, 8 p.m. ET live. And Jesse, you're going to be part of the announcing crew. You're going to do a match or two. And not only are you a Hall of Famer, you are one of the great broadcasters of all time. So I'm so happy to have you on TV again.
Well, thanks, Bill. It's great to be here. And the ironic thing is that we're holding this event in the very building that we held the very first one way back in the 80s.
So which building is it? I don't even know.
I don't know, Nassau Coliseum, wherever. The one out in Long Island.
Yeah.
That's where we held it back then. And so they're going to hold this very first one of the new NBC Saturday Night's Main Event. And what's exciting about it, and I got the word on this, the whole show is going to be a throwback.
What does that mean?
Well, that means it's going to look like it did before.
Really?
Yeah.
The graphics, everything?
Yes, the wrestlers are not coming down that ramp. They're not coming with all the lights and spectacular. They're coming in through the crowd.
Wow.
Like the old days. That's why they brought me back.
Amazing. Well, you should be back anyway.
We're going back in a time capsule, only it's going to be 4 times a year.
Unbelievable. So what was, of all the Friday night main event, Saturday night main event, and I know it's almost 40 years ago, but what was the most memorable one for you? Because you were there for most of them.
I'll get to them, but I need to make more of an introduction here.
Yeah.
Hell has frozen over.
Why?
Because I never dreamed I would be back in the WWE, now WWF, until hell froze over. I had a friend, Glenn Fry of the Eagles. And I remember when the Eagles broke up, they thought, oh, it's over. We'll never hear another Eagles song. The differences are too much. They'll never be able to mend fences. And lo and behold, Glenn got together with, and away with Don Henley, and away they go. They came back and they cut that phenomenal album, When Hell Freezes Over. I never believed in my wildest dreams I would be back doing wrestling again.
Well, in the Eagles case, hell froze over because they made a shitload of money on that concert tour. I think was one of the reasons, right? That was like one of the first great nostalgia tours ever. So what's the case for you? Why did hell freeze over?
Well, because for me, it's a full circle of my career. I can't go back in the United States Navy, where I spent my first 6 years.
Yeah.
After I graduated from high school, I was in the Navy, United States Navy, for 6 years. I can't do that because there's age limits. My friend Rudy Bosch stayed as long as you could. He had 44 years in when they threw Rudy out. But anyway, that aside, but this is ironic because it means my career has gone full circle.
Right. Well,
and here's the part that I don't understand. They couldn't control me before. Why do they believe they can now?
Oh, I like this. Is that really why? Is that what happened with you? They felt like they couldn't control you? Like when you talk about fences being mended.
I was thrown out. I was uncontrollable. Jesse the Body Ventura. Number one, I tried to unionize.
Right.
Number two, I wouldn't allow them to market me without negotiating it. That's what ultimately got me thrown out of the WWF, WWE. Then I went to WCW. Here's the behind the scenes story. I went to WCW. They went into turmoil. The guy who hired me got fired. They brought in Bill Watts, who was an old school relic who didn't understand the business had changed. It had gone to television now, not to putting seats in the stands. The money was now going to be in TV. He didn't get that. So he comes in, and then he gets fired, and I busted my butt behind the scenes to get Eric Bischoff into the position. And here's where it got interesting. Eric Bischoff then got the head job at WCW. And then behind my back, he went out and got Hogan because Hogan was leaving the WWF or getting booted or whatever was happening with his career. They gave Hogan total artistic control. He came in, got me immediately fired because he took over my look. He put the shades on, he put the do-rag on, and he became a villain. He couldn't have Jesse Ventura be there and become Jesse Ventura. So he got me fired. And in essence, my wrestling career was over. I had worked for the two major, I wasn't going into one of these little outlaw ones in your own hometown. That wasn't about to happen. I looked to other things. What did I do? I went to the dirtiest business on the planet, got myself elected mayor, and went on and got myself defeated the Democrats and Republicans at the same time, and got myself elected governor of Minnesota. And dig this, I only raised $300,000 to do it. You want to know who could have been president if he wanted to be? You're talking to him.
Well, you beat a legacy kid too in Minnesota. You upended both parties and beat Humphrey's son.
Oh, I beat Hubert Humphrey's son. I beat Senator Norm Coleman. Well, on the Democratic side at that time, we called it My Three Sons. You had the sons of Hubert Humphrey, Orville Freeman, and Mondale. So it was my three sons on the Democratic side.
The legacy kids always have trouble in politics and sports. I want to go back to Hogan, though, because and there's been a lot written and a lot discussed, but you haven't seen it yet. But we did the 6-episode documentary on Vince McMahon for Netflix, and we had a big section there about when you tried to unionize in '86 before WrestleMania 2. That we ended up in the final cut. We only had 6+ hours. We ended up it's in there, but we cut it down a little from one of the cuts. We had like 8-9 minutes because it was so interesting. And what really happened was Hogan shanked you, and Hogan admitted to us on camera. That he went and ran to Vince and told him what you were trying to do, and you were basically trying to upend WrestleMania 2, get it so that they would have health benefits, all kinds of stuff that they didn't have.
It was okay. Here's the story.
Yeah,
it was. I knew this was the perfect time, and then of course we had to get with the Charlotte guys and have them walk out also. If we could have got us and Charlotte, it was perfect timing. All the publicity was out there. He couldn't change nothing. There wasn't time for it.
The pay-per-views are being sold, the WrestleMania 2, 3 cities, the whole thing.
It's 2 weeks before the show. All we had to do was, as in mass, walk out, go to the media, and say we refuse to wrestle unless federal negotiators for union are brought in. It's federal law. He couldn't stop it. It's federal law. And we refuse to perform until we're allowed to unionize or collective bargain and bring these people in. And I made that passion speech. And when I was done, I went home, and the next day Vince calls me immediately. Well, I found out apparently he called all the wrestlers and threatened them all and all of this stuff, I guess. I didn't know about that, but he called me. And I stood up to him. I said, Vince, this isn't just to fight you. I said, this is about the fact right now, and this was mid-'80s. I said, right now I'm paying $5,000 a year for health insurance for me and my family. I said, if we had...
Out of your own pocket.
Out of my pocket. If we had a union, there's strength in numbers. Maybe I'd only have to pay $2,000 a year instead of $5,000. I said, Vince, I've seen hundreds of guys give 20 years of their life to this business, and in the end, they ain't got a pot to piss in, a window to throw it out of. I said, we're wrestlers. We're not financial planners. Right. And I said, if we had a union, maybe a guy could retire on $500 a month and get something for the 20, 30 years you give to this business. I said, it isn't just about fighting you. I said, sure, and we'd like working conditions to where if you go on the road 3 days in a row, you're then given so many days off. so
Well,
that you
wait,
can
hold on. Wait a
recoup.
second. You got to give context on this because in the 70s and 80s, you guys are on the road for 300, 310 days a year.
Well,
You're wrestling
I'll tell
everywhere. You're in all the
I'll
territories
tell you how
nonstop.
bad it was. When I got injured with pulmonary emboli, blood clots in the lungs,
Yep.
that was caused by flying.
Really?
Yes, they've determined it today that you're very more susceptible. That's why you need to exercise on planes. So, and they don't say nothing now because the airline people are well aware of it. I get up on every plane and do toe raises for 10 minutes. The flight attendant won't say a word to you. They know exactly what you're doing.
Interesting.
But the point is, here's how bad it was. The month that I had the pulmonary emboli, blood clots, do you know how many days that month I flew? 28.
Oh my God, really?
Yes.
And you were one of the headliners at that point. Like you were going against Hogan. You were one of their best guys.
You're talking 30 days in a month, and 28 of them I was on an airplane.
Right. So for Vince's business, the way he has it, where it's basically
let's get back to that's what I wanted the union for.
Yeah.
I wanted the union and for Hogan to then make a statement. Well, I didn't want to get paid like everybody else. He makes it sound like unionizing is socialism and communism. Does Pat Mahomes make the same money as everybody else in the NFL? Of course not. He makes way more. And they have a union. Does LeBron James make more than everybody in the NBA? Yes, of course he does. And they have a union. Hogan would have still made more. That's a lame excuse. You want to know how bad it was? It came out in my court case. My court case against Vince, we have the numbers from WrestleMania 3, right? The big one. Pontiac Silverdome.
Yeah.
Hogan against Andre. And then the greatest match that I ever saw, Ricky Steamboat against Macho. The greatest match I'd ever broadcast or ever seen, that match. But that aside, we got the numbers in my court case. Hulk Hogan made more that night than all of the rest of us combined, including Andre.
Wow. I mean, he did probably was the biggest reason they sold out the Silverdome.
You want to know why he'd lay his life down to stop a union?
Well, he denied it forever and ever, right? He always said he never did it. And now he admits that he did it.
And here's why. If you come from the business during my era of the old territory days, the worst thing you can be accused of being is an office stooge. That's somebody who rides around with the boys, pretends he's one of them, but all the while he's listening to the gossip and he's reporting it back to the promoters. Taking care of himself and being, quote, an office stooge. That, in my day of wrestling, was the worst thing you could ever be.
Well, what's interesting about
that's what Hogan was.
Your relationship with him, you didn't know for a few years, right? It didn't come out to the steroid trial that he had in '94 that he had been actually going back and telling Vince.
It didn't come out until my trial that I had. And it only came out because I told my attorney the story. And when you depose someone, you can ask anything in a deposition. So I told my attorney the story, and my attorney was great. They beat Vince. And my attorney, I said, if you can find out who ratted me, I would really love to know who was the rat in the dressing room that ratted me out. And so during the deposition, I can't say anything. I'm sitting there, and my attorney asked Vince, he said, Mr. McMahon, he said, has there ever been a union in wrestling? And Vince said, no. And my attorney said, has anyone ever tried to form a union in wrestling? And Vince thought a moment, and he said, yeah. He said, I think Jesse Ventura might have spouted his mouth. I remember he used the term spouted his mouth off about it one time a number of years ago. And my attorney said, oh, really? He said, did you hear Mr. Ventura talk about unionizing? And Vince went, no. And my attorney said, well, then how were you aware of it? with no hesitation, Vince went, Hulk Hogan told me. I almost fell out of my chair. Now, I had to sit there. I can't show no emotion. I can't, it's a deposition. I can't talk. I can't, nothing. I can only sit there and confer with my attorney. It was as rough as getting hit in the face with a hard left jab, because Hulk Hogan had, I thought, been my friend.
Who did you think did it then? Before you found out it was Hogan, who did you think was the one that told Vince?
I had no idea. That's why I wanted to find out. I wanted to know who was the rat in the dressing room, because I made sure there was nobody from the office when I made the speech. Because I made sure of it. Pat Patterson wasn't there. Strongbow wasn't in there. None of the agents were there.
So you knew, because you started wrestling almost 50 years ago, and you were in, I think, the Portland territory, where you wrestled against one of my favorites, Snuka, back when he really had the hops. You were in Minnesota. That's when you teamed up with Adrian Adonis.
Sure.
AWA. But then you ended up in the WWF back then, early 80s, right around when Hogan was in there as a bad guy. So you must have known him forever.
No, Hogan came into the AWA when I was there.
Oh, you're right. So that was even like the 79, 80 range.
Vern wouldn't give him the title, and Vern wouldn't let him market himself. And so Hogan made the smart move. He jumped right away to Vince, who let him do all that. And, financially, I don't begrudge Hogan that. Yeah, I'd have did the same thing too.
Yeah.
But him ratting us, that was low.
Well,
but anyway, that was the nature of the business. Everyone's out for themselves. It's always been that nature of the business. That's how the business survived, was backstabbing.
We had a couple of what if scenarios when Vince took over, and we played it up a little in the documentary, but not as much as I think we could have, because one of the guys he wanted was Dusty Rhodes, because he knew he had to get rid of Bob Backlund. He knew he needed a more charismatic champ. And then the other one was Hogan. And at that point, Hogan was in the AWA, as you said, but Vern Gagne wouldn't give him the title coming off Rocky III when they were on ESPN. And there's this whole alternate universe where Vern Gagne just says, I should just build AWA around this guy. And Hogan never leaves and becomes like this ESPN star. And I don't know what happens to wrestling if that happens.
I don't know. Who the heck would know?
It's a good sliding doors, though, right?
Well, then it would have been a hell of a lot more challenging for Vince to go across the country like he did.
Right.
Because Vince needed Hogan just as Hogan needed him. They needed each other.
Yeah.
That was a mutual deal. And don't begrudge either one of them. What they accomplished was remarkable, and I was happy to be part of it.
Yeah, I mean, it worked out perfectly for all sides. It is interesting though. Sometimes,
and it worked out great for me because, unfortunately, my career ended right before I was due to wrestle Hogan. The night before, I was due to wrestle Hogan in L.A. My first match with him in the WWF, and I'm 7 days critical in the San Diego hospital so bad.
Jesus.
My wife had to fly out to San Diego. I didn't know if I'd ever wrestle again. And ironically, who came to my rescue?
Who?
And she don't even know it, I bet today. I bet if you asked her, she wouldn't even truly know it. Cyndi Lauper.
Really?
Yeah.
How did she come to your rescue?
I will always have a place in my heart for Cyndi Lauper.
So what did she do?
Because
she noticed you weren't feeling good?
Well, Cyndi Lauper did me a favor that ended up creating my entire broadcasting career.
Which was
I went home facing the end of my wrestling career. What do I do now? Am I going to go down to General Mills and sign on as a VP and put down past experience pro wrestler? You're not going to get no job.
Yeah.
And like all pro athletes in its own weird way, nobody ever thinks about it till it's over. And then when it's over, you got to face it. And I had to face it prematurely. I did come back in the ring, but I never came back to the extent of what I was doing. And a friend of mine said, here's the Lauper story. A friend of mine said, you should be a broadcaster. You can talk. So I went down to Channel 11, Tom Ryther. He just passed away a few months ago, my friend Tom Ryther. And I told Tom my situation. He was the head of sports down there. So he introduced me to the head guy of the station. And he gave me a producer cameraman who was Emmy Award winning. And he said, okay. He said, go out and do something for me.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
So it was right during the Cyndi Lauper rock and wrestling crap. You know, when Cyndi was all involved with Wendy Richter and it was going big and all that.
MTV.
Cyndi was doing a concert here in Minneapolis. So I called up David Wolf, her manager, and I said, could I come down and interview Cyndi before the show? He said, of course. And so I came down with my guy. We got together with Cyndi, and it was during that punk era. So we decided to have Cyndi dye my hair. So Cyndi Lauper dyed my hair like 6 different colors, because that was in then. And that night at her concert, she brought me out in front of the crowd to show the crowd what we had did that afternoon. Right. And Vince got a hold of that tape, and it was like 2 days later, he calls me and he says, Jesse, do you think you could do color commentating? And I said, I know I could. And he said, I got an idea. I said, what is it? He said, there's never been a villain on the mic before. You're going to be the first one.
Honestly, one of the great ideas. And I wish we had them in actual sports. It would be really fun if we had football, NBA. We had somebody who was the heel announcer. I know they would never do it, but super fun.
Like I said, that's so Cyndi, I bet, don't even know.
Yeah.
That the piece she did with me spurred McMahon to have the light. And I give Vince credit. He's P.T. Barnum of the generation, man. Yeah. The light bulb went out in Vince's head, and he thought, there's never been a villain on the mic. Let's put a villain on the mic. And then I was fortunate, because who did they put me on with but Gorilla Monsoon?
Right. One of the great teams.
I mean, Gino was a dream.
So
to work with. You know, you couldn't have asked for an easier, better tandem. I don't think Gino and I ever had a misunderstanding. Ever. Wow. I can't think of one.
Can we go back to your wrestling for a second? How did you ever hit your peak? Do you feel like there was more there? Did you hit your ceiling? When were you at your best?
Well, I think I was at my best right before I was going to go against Hogan.
Right. So how old are you at that point? You're like late 30s?
Earlier 30s.
Right.
Yeah, but I'm right where I ought to be for it.
Right.
And you could have been experience.
You could have been one of the big heels.
I'm as big as I'm ever going to be. And right there, and all of a sudden I'm flat on my back in critical condition in San Diego, California, not knowing if I'm going to live or die.
And yet, weirdly, physically, it was probably better for you long term.
Well, I always view it as, and I tell people this when I give speeches and stuff, I always tell people, remember, out of adversity, great things can happen. When you think adversity struck you and that everything has gone to shit, it's amazing how, look what I fell into then. I got more famous being on the mic than I probably ever would have been in the ring.
I mean, the thing you tapped into, which was so funny, wrestling was all about provoking reaction, either a happy reaction or an angry reaction, right? The more heat you can get, whether you're wrestling,
that's why I'm saying,
manager, whatever, that's where you want to be.
They couldn't control me then. What makes them think they can now?
Well, you were the first announcer that made people mad.
Exactly. Do they have any idea the power I have now? Do they have any idea the guy that's going to be on that mic sat down face to face with Fidel Castro?
Right.
Do they have any idea that the guy on that mic had a dinner in his honor at Tiananmen Square in China?
Wow.
And
So you've seen it all.
And I did all this after wrestling.
What was your relationship with Vince the last 25 years? Because you came back, you got inducted into the Hall of Fame. But other than that, you weren't really around.
I had no relationship with him.
Nothing.
Really, nothing.
So what was your reaction watching the last 5 years as it all kind of fell apart?
Well, when I got inducted into the Hall of Fame, they asked me what I felt my biggest contribution was to pro wrestling. And I think I shocked everyone, and I know I irritated Vince and Linda, but I said, I believe my biggest contribution to wrestling was the fact that I was the first wrestler in history who made Vince McMahon deal with a manager or an agent.
Is that true?
Yes. Hogan never did. Hogan dealt with Vince. It's him and Vince.
And you beat him on a lawsuit too.
Hogan had a Hollywood agent.
Yeah.
But I was the first one that, and that resulted because of Predator.
Right. Which he didn't want you to do.
He told me I couldn't do it. So I quit. And I went and did Predator. And while I was doing Predator, Arnold said, in September, I'm going to do The Running Man. There's a part you're perfect for. Would you like to do it? And I said, hell yeah. And so I negotiated Running Man first. Then I went back to Vince. And you know why that was? That gives you FU money in your pocket.
Right.
Where if he doesn't do what I'm satisfied with, I tell him flake off. I'm doing The Running Man in the fall. I'm okay. I got another major movie with Arnold that's going to come up in the fall.
But the thing is, all of that stuff was fantastic for the WWF at the time.
Sure,
to have their announcer be in these high-profile movies with one of the biggest movie stars we had.
That ain't what it's about with him. With people like him and power people with money like that, it's control. It ain't got nothing to do with doing deals and doing the right thing and promoting the correct way. It's all about control. I was the horse that got out of the corral. I wouldn't let him market me. That's the final straw. I was going to do my own video game. And Vince said, you can't do it. I said, I own my rights. I'm registered with the government. Jesse the Body Ventura, I own the copyright with the government. How can you tell me I can't do it? And that was the final straw. That's when he fired me. And then I think because I never did get the video game. So I think some hanky-pank went on there too.
Oh, no. Well, then when you sued him.
I have no evidence.
When you sued him, it was because you felt like you were given the wrong impression of a contract you signed that signed away your rights to be basically in all the home video stuff they did. Oh, that's what it was. Okay.
I never had a contract.
So when you sued them, what were you suing them for? And the important point is that you won.
Well, I sued them over videotape royalties.
Right.
And not that he had to pay me, but all the time that I was working for Vince, I would ask him, Vince, how come everything I do in Hollywood, when they replay it, I get royalties, and everything I do for you, I get nothing? I said, how does that work? It was just he and I. I'd be there with him alone. I said, tell me how that works. How come I get royalties in Hollywood and I don't with you? And he'd give me these phony excuses of why. So what I did, every time at that time, my agent was Barry Bloom. Every time I or Barry would negotiate with the WWF, we would bring up videotape royalties. And every time we were told the same thing. I don't pay videotape royalties. Well, we won in court on what's called quantum merit. And what that means, Vince didn't have to pay royalties. There's no law that says he does.
Yeah.
But here's how I beat him. When you sit down to negotiate, you expect the other side to be telling you the truth. We were constantly lied to by being told he didn't pay royalties. Well, when we sued and got into discovery, we found out Hulk Hogan was getting royalties, Mr. T was getting royalties, Cyndi Lauper was getting royalties, everybody from mainstream Hollywood were all getting royalties.
Right.
It was us wrestlers who weren't. Well, he lied during those negotiations and said, I don't pay royalties. That's called quantum merit. That's where he broke the law. He has to tell the truth during negotiations. You expect that. He can't lie. And the truth was, yes, he paid royalties. And when I got on the stand, my attorney asked me, Jesse Ventura, had you known other people were receiving royalties, would you have agreed to work for what you did? I said, absolutely not. I said, if I found out other people were getting royalties, I would have demanded them too.
There you go.
And the jury found for me.
Vince didn't probably like that, I'm guessing.
Oh, he hated it. He took it all the way to the Supreme Court, for cripe's sake.
Wow.
And then he calls me on the phone and screams into my ear when it's all over, that's my money. And I very calmly said to him, Vince, I said, the jury said it was my money. The federal judge said it was my money. The United States Court of Appeals said it was my money. And the Supreme Court says it's my money. I said, Vince, I think you're a minority opinion.
And that's that.
And that was the end of it.
So 10 years after you left, give or take a year,
yeah,
he became a heel. He became heel owner after Bret Hart punched him.
Yeah.
And that led to Montreal Screwjob. And it leads to this whole character arc where he's the owner of WWF at that point. But is also bleeding in, and it's hard to tell what's real, what's not real. Did you ever figure that out when you worked with him? What was real and what wasn't real with that guy?
No. I had nothing to do with any of that. I was gone.
But what about in the 80s, though?
Way back in the 80s, the Bret Hart thing wasn't going on.
No, I'm saying him as a person, like the businessman guy versus the visionary guy versus the leader of WWE.
Vince was successful because as bad as he was, all the other promoters were worse.
Right. Yeah.
No, I'm serious.
No, I believe you. I'm laughing because you're right.
Vince was like the savior.
Yeah.
I knew when I went to Vince that final time, I was going to quit the business. This was it. I'm going to do this last hurrah with Vince. If it fails, I'm done. If it succeeds, we'll take it to wherever it goes. And fortunately, we succeeded. Did you ever? I was in pretty much. I knew I was going to do it well before I did it, because there's another story behind that, but I won't go into it today. But it's a long one. But Vince actually did me a great favor along the way. And that's why I had loyalty to him.
Okay.
And I'll just leave it at that.
A favor in the early 80s, mid 80s, or late 80s?
Early 80s to mid 80s, when the jump happened.
Right.
Well, I'll tell you the final straw of why I jumped from the AWA to Vince. Want to hear that?
Yeah.
I was with Saito then, Mr. Torture.
Yeah.
And we were, of course, the Far East West connection. And me and Torch were wrestling tag team then in the AWA, and Vince was just starting to make his big move. And they ran La Crosse, Wisconsin. And we went down there and we did an angle for a cage match, right? And so 3 weeks later, we got the payoff. It was okay. 3 weeks later, we came back to La Crosse, me and Saito, for the cage match. And Vern and Greg were on their yearly Aspen vacation.
The Gagnes.
Where they go up to Aspen and ski and have fun. That's what they were doing then when we had the rematch in lacrosse, and it was in the cage, and the house jumped, I think, $20,000 to $25,000, right, in business. And I got my paycheck, and I got less money. And this was at a time when Hogan had just jumped. And I got paid, the house went up, and I got paid less. And Gagnes were on their vacation. Well, I knew who was paying for the vacation. We were. And so I came up to Wally Carbo, and I said, Wally, what the hell is this? I said, the house jumps $25,000 and I get less money. I said, well, the next time I hope nobody's there. I'll get more money. I said, what kind of bullshit is this?
Right.
And this is at a time he should have been taking care of his wrestlers, not cheating them.
So that was that.
And that's what happened. And that was the final straw for me.
All right. You wrestled a bunch of guys.
Yeah.
From 75 to 86. Who is the best one? Who is the best in-ring guy you wrestled?
Who did I like to wrestle the most?
No, the best. Like if you're playing a sport.
I don't know who the best was, but the guy I liked to wrestle and work with the most was Tito Santana.
Really? Why?
Because Tito and I go back to the AWA, and we were on the same wavelength. He understood my style, and he adapted completely to me, and he had total confidence that when it was his time, I would always give it to him. And I never had a bad match ever with Tito Santana. I would say right with him would be Jimmy Snuka.
You
know,
my first favorite.
Jimmy Snuka, Tito Santana.
Was Snuka doing the stuff in Portland? Was he doing the jump off the top rope, all that stuff, even in the mid-70s? He was
doing everything, and everyone was saying, Jimmy, why are you wasting it here? Get to New York.
Right. You need a bigger audience.
There had to have been 10 to 15 people that told Jimmy Snuka to get to New York.
Jeez. And
I was one of them because I wanted him there because I knew I wouldn't be far behind him.
Right. What was the most memorable?
And if he wasn't a villain out there, I knew I'd get to work with him.
Right. What was the most memorable main event that you did a broadcast for? Because I have a couple in my head.
What's the most memorable match I ever did was Macho and Steamboat. That's the greatest match in WrestleMania 3.
What about the Twin Hebners? You did that one, right?
Probably, I think so.
When Hogan lost the title because the twin referee came out?
Oh, yeah. I vaguely remember it now. That was a good one. Yeah, the Hebner brothers. That was a good one. See, you're reminding me of this stuff. I don't have memory of a lot of it.
Yeah, you're in the grind.
And I'll tell you why. When Hogan got me bumped out of WCW, that was it. I stopped watching. I didn't pay attention. I vaguely only remember the Rock against Stone Cold.
Yeah.
I know that was huge, but I wasn't watching it. It had nothing to do with me.
What?
And I moved on. Put it this way, I moved on with my life.
You moved forward.
I wasn't going to let wrestling define me.
So, Running Man versus Predator, what movie gets mentioned more to you over the last
Predator.
35 years? Predator more. Okay.
Predator.
What is the number one thing that you get asked about it?
It's my film. No. Certain films have lines that define them. And if you go to Predator,
you have the most famous line.
The defining line of the movie. I ain't got time to bleed.
I can't argue with it.
Arnold, just as in Terminator, Arnold's "I'll be back."
So have you told Arnold this? Hey, just FYI, I had the best line in Predator.
No, Why would I do that?
You should, because you could.
That's all up to, there's no one that can say it was or wasn't. That's all up to the discretion of anybody. I'm just saying 20th Century Fox printed it on a T-shirt.
Well, you know what's interesting?
And gave them and sold them. I feel great because every film usually has one line that defines it.
Yeah.
And I had a supporting role. In fact, the biggest complaint that I receive on Predator is that I died too soon.
Well, that's my biggest complaint.
But see, then I have to inform you it had to be that way.
Why?
Why?
Well, you could have made it 15 more minutes.
No. It had to be that way. You know why?
Why?
I was the toughest guy. And you noticed I was the only one that had a funeral. Right?
All right. Yeah.
Okay. And here's the biggest thing. When I died is when the platoon went to shit.
The stakes got higher.
Blaine was dead. Blaine doesn't
now we're in
die.
trouble.
Blaine doesn't die. This guy is the closest thing to Superman. He's been through all these wars, all these incursions, walked out of every one of them. How can Blaine be dead? What could kill Blaine?
You know,
that's why I had to die. Remember when Sonny Landham turns and says, "We're all gonna die." Because why? Blaine was dead.
And you were there for the Van Damme stuff, Van Damme. The Van Damme playing the Predator for like a couple minutes, right? And then he got fired.
Yeah. I was there when John came down.
So when he became a star later, were you like, that guy?
No, not at all. Jean-Claude had talent. Jean-Claude, he was living out of his trunk at the time when I met him. Yeah. And that was the first job he ever got. And I think he didn't understand that he thought he was going to be running through the jungle and all the girls were going to see his handsome, pretty face. And I think when he got down there, he realized nobody was going to see his pretty face.
Right.
He was going to be inside of some type of suit. And they hired him because they thought he'd be agile with his karate stuff. Well, he wasn't.
Not in that suit.
No. And they fired him. And they got Kevin Peter Hall, a 7'1" black man. And Kevin filled out the suit a lot better.
How much?
I don't know. I never saw The Predator. Ever.
What do you mean?
Until a screening in Chicago.
Oh.
And what's good about that, I'm not supposed to see it. It's invisible, isn't it?
Well, when you watch it now, the special effects.
No. It was
we didn't
invisible.
have in the 80s. It was tough.
It was invisible. That's why I couldn't see it in the first place. I only saw it for the first time at a screening in Chicago. We had to pretend it was killing us. We couldn't see it. I never saw what it was going to look like.
You were just acting.
Yes. I never saw The Predator till they created it long after we were done shooting.
How much input did you have over Captain Freedom's workout video in Running Man?
In Running Man?
Hey, you had a whole workout video in that.
Complete freedom. Like my name. Do you want to hear the backstory?
Yeah.
Oh, it's a great one. Running Man. So I'm the retired stalker who now has this physical fitness show on TV, right?
Yeah.
That's what I do now, as well as color commentate the Running Man game.
Right.
And so I have my workout thing in the day. So what occurred was this. When they needed to do that, she wasn't famous yet for singing. That was due to happen in like a year or two. But they sent me over to this nice little beautiful young woman by the name of Paula Abdul.
Mm.
And they sent me over to her dance studio because Paula's at the time, one of the top choreographers in Hollywood. And I'll never forget, she knew what she had to do. I knew basically what I was there for. And I remember Paula Abdul, she got famous singing a couple years later, but she came up to me that day and it was hilarious. I'm 260 pounds, this hulking big monster. And she's this bitsy little tiny girl, athletic as hell, can do all this, got these skinny girls that can do all this dancing in Hollywood. And she looks at me and she goes, looks at me and smiles. And she says, "What can you do?"
What was the answer?
Wait. And I looked at her. And at the time at home, I had started taking aerobics. And I had done aerobics. I challenged myself. I had gotten up to level 3, an hour and a half with David Gray, the Crystal Light National Aerobics Champion. He was my instructor in Minneapolis, the Crystal Light National Aerobics Champion. So I looked at Paula Abdul. I said, for the last few months, I'm getting ready for this. I've been doing aerobics. She looked at me, a big smile. She says, "Great." She goes, "You do aerobics, we'll dance around you." I went, "Okay." And that's what we did.
There you go.
I went out and went through aerobic routines. And Paula choreographed all the girls to dance around my routines and make it work. And there you have Captain Freedom's workout.
So you worked with Hogan and Schwarzenegger during this mid-'80s testosterone, very patriotic time in America.
And Stallone.
So when did you work with Stallone?
Demo Man.
That was 90s though. I was thinking more 80s.
Well, okay, that was late 90s. And they also cut our fight scene completely.
Well, I was going to say, because you couldn't have worked with Stallone in the 80s because you were so much bigger than him. I don't know how they would have done that.
I was bigger than him in the 90s, too.
Well, that's the
thing. I forgot. I don't have to lean into Mike.
No. No, but I mean, it is funny because that era of a lot of muscles. Predator's the peak of it because Predator just has entire bicep scenes. It's just close up of oiled biceps, just where we were in 1987.
Well, the great thing about Arnold is he's not insecure.
Yeah.
When you've won Mr. Olympia 7 times, come on. That's the best built man in the world.
Yeah.
And he won it 7 times. Arnold doesn't have insecurities.
And you just clicked with him. Like you played pranks with him, all kinds of stuff.
Well, Arnold doesn't care that I'm 2 or 3 inches taller than him. That doesn't bother him.
Yeah. You playing pranks on the set with him? There's good YouTube stuff about you playing pranks with that, trying to convince people you had bigger biceps than him, all that stuff.
Oh, I think that really got blown out of proportion. We did more. I don't know. The thing about doing a Schwarzenegger film is you're going to have fun.
Yeah.
That's the fun part about it. Arnold never takes himself too seriously, only when he has to. You know. I was also in the trailer with him, sitting right there when these guys came up to him. Excuse me. We weren't even finished doing Predator.
Yeah.
And these guys were approaching him about the sequel, Predator 2.
Which they did without him.
Wait, I won't say the money because it's no one's business.
Yeah.
But I sat right there and they offered Arnold, and this was 1985, 86. They offered him so much money to do Predator 2 and he turned them down flat. When they left, I looked at him and I said, "Arnold," it's just him and I. I said, "How in the hell do you turn down?" And I said the figure. Arnold looked at me and smiled. You know what he said to me? "Jesse, the time is not right." And he was right.
Yeah.
The Predator sequel was a bomb. People know. Look at what he did on Terminator. He made them wait 7 years. He made the public want the sequel.
Smart. I mean, he constructed his career the best.
If you come out with a sequel immediately after the film, everybody knows it's just a money ripoff.
Yeah, that's true.
They're capitalizing on Arnold wouldn't fall victim to that. The money he turned down, you would have been astounded. And he turned them, I won't say because it's no one's business. But in fact, I said, hey, Blaine will bring Blaine's twin brother. He'll do it for half. I said, you can resurrect me. I'll
Blaine
do it
has
for
a
half.
brother. Yeah. Oh my God, there he is.
Blaine's twin brother. There he is. He'll do it for half.
He's fighting in Korea. When Arnold ran in California, did he talk to you about it? Because you had already been through it in Minnesota. Just did it.
Arnold and I never discussed politics once during my campaign or during his.
Because he
lives in California. I live in Minnesota. Why am I going to campaign for him in California? What the hell is he going to say in Minnesota?
Well, I don't think he had to campaign, but he could ask you for advice about being a non-politician who's a celebrity trying to run for stuff.
He didn't need it, and neither did I. We both won, didn't we?
Yeah, true.
So we must have did it right, didn't we?
And then Trump does it in 2016
and
steals some of your playbook.
He took all of it. He's still riding it, and they won't admit it. They won't. He took all of it. Took my playbook. I didn't raise money. I held rallies. You know how much money I raised to become governor?
Wasn't it like less than $1 million?
300,000.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting.
That's all I raised. If I ran for, I'll tell you what, I could have beat either one. I could have won the presidency if I had. If Mark Cuban would have backed me financially, like who do you call it, back Trump, I'd have beat both of them if I'd have wanted to.
What year? 2016?
Right now. And Trump knows it. You want to know why he knows it? He's in the Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame. He knows damn well I'm the greatest talker there's ever been in wrestling. He knows damn well he couldn't hold a candle to me. If I had a debate with him, the best thing he could do would be sit in a chair, keep his mouth shut, and let me talk.
Yeah, physically, he would be able to intimidate you.
Oh, not a bit. Donald Trump knows deep in his heart, and Jesse Ventura's never lost an election. I would have been the biggest threat he'd ever had out there because I'd have beat him.
Well, he wrote
you know why else I'd have beat him? I ain't a criminal.
He wrote a book in 2000, and he was talking about how you got elected governor in Minnesota, and he said, it's because he talks straight. Non-politicians like Ventura are the wave of the future. He wrote that in 2000. He wasn't wrong on that one.
Yeah, yes, he was, though, in a way, because he didn't talk straight.
I was just saying non-politicians.
He took it beyond that. He took it to wrestling, lied about everything.
Well, and he also learned some stuff from Vince, too.
Well, no, and I mean lied about everything. He just say whatever he wanted to say. I'll be interested now, and I'll leave it at this. Let's watch in the next 4 years how much of that stuff gets implemented.
You liked him in 2015 when he was running. You were for it.
No, I wasn't necessarily. I don't support Democrats or Republicans. He joined the Republican Party, and he even did worse. He joined the ultra-conservative evangelical right. Pretty hard for an agnostic atheist to support that.
Why didn't you run again after 2003?
Multiple reasons. Personal, more to do in life. I could have won easily. I remember when I had the highest approval ratings in Minnesota history at 73%, 72%. And I remember right before re-election was due to happen, I had fallen to 49%. And the media immediately challenged me and said, oh my God, for the first time, you're under 50%. I looked at the media and I said, are you guys really that stupid? I said, you must consider something. It's a 3-person race. If I'm at 49%, that means I'm up 12. I won with 37.
Right.
So if I'm now at 49, I'm up 12. It's a landslide. People forget in a 3-person race, the dynamics change.
You were not a huge fan of the media when you were governor.
Mainly because they attacked my children. They couldn't attack nothing else, so they had to go after my son. They had to go after my kids.
Well, that sounded like that was a big reason why you didn't want to do it again.
One of the reasons.
Yeah.
The other was money. You know how much I was being governor for? Let's get it on the board.
Yeah.
All right. When I was governor, I got paid $120,000 a year. You know how much the football coach at the University of Minnesota makes? $4 to $5 million a year.
Right.
So I guess coaching football has more responsibility than being governor. I can only assume that by how our society pays. The governor makes 150, but at my time it was 120, and the football coach makes $4 million, $5 million. Okay, out of the 120,000, I had to pay taxes.
Yeah.
Right? Out of the 120,000, I also had to pay for my car that drove me around. They deduct the mileage to and from the Capitol. They only let you have it during the workday. So I said to them, okay, I'll drive my private car to the Capitol, then I'll take the governor's car so I don't get charged money. Oh, public safety come in and said, you can't do that. Why? We need you in the governor's car because it's got the weapons and the safety and the radios. So it's a catch-22. They make you use the car and then charge you for it. It comes out of your paycheck. It don't end there. You know what else I had to pay for? Every meal that me and my family ate at the governor's residence is deducted out of my pay.
So you were like writing books when you were in office. You were doing a bunch of different things to try to make more money.
I was being governor of Minnesota in the end. I'd say for $40,000 a year.
Yeah. Well, there you go.
And I'm in charge of a $16 billion budget. What do you think I'd be making if I was the CEO in the private sector of a $16 billion company? If I was the CEO, 120 a year.
Well, it sounds like you should have been the football coach.
Yeah, it pays a lot better.
Do you still keep in touch?
I might even win more. But anyway, no, that was a reason I didn't run again. Being honest, the money. Oh, I guess I could have made more money if I wanted to become corrupt. You know, if I'd have wanted to sell my soul to rock and roll and take some payola, I suppose there was money to be made. Jesse was just too naive, and Jesse's just too honest. I don't do that. That's called public service. I did 14 years of it. 6 in the Navy, 4 as a governor, and 4 as a mayor.
Looking back, what was the most fair criticism of you as a politician?
The most fair criticism?
Yeah.
Probably that I speak first before I think, that I'll react and say something that I'll have to make amends for it because you're in the political arena. That's what's wonderful now about coming back to wrestling.
Yeah. You don't have to worry about that. Right.
Handcuffs are off. I can say anything I want about anyone.
Sounds like you're excited about this.
I am. I'm very excited about it.
All right.
I mean, I'm making, I don't discuss finances, but it's acceptable. And I'll be doing 4 a year.
Yeah. Well, the bigger thing is you're back, which always felt stupid that
I'm
You
back,
weren't back.
And for me, it's concluding a career that probably never should have finished.
Right.
And maybe now there'll be closure.
Yeah.
Jesse can broadcast till he dies, and then they can have my WWE funeral.
Well, I said you don't know. You said you don't like looking back. But when I think of the 80s as wrestling blows up, I mean, you're right at the center of all of it. Hogan's leading the way, and there's probably like 5, 6, 7, 8 other guys right behind who are helping push it up. You were one of those people.
Sure.
And I especially like the TV stuff was so good.
Wrestling changed then from becoming a live spectator sport drawing the money.
Territorial lives.
The big money then became television, like it is in all sports. I remember when I broadcast football for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I did their 2 years of Buccaneer football down in Tampa. And I remember that Hugh Culverhouse paid off. He was the owner of the Bucs. He paid all his bills, including all the players, everything, with his TV contract. So that people in the seats, that was all his profit. He all the people that sold out Tampa Stadium every week to see the Bucs play, that was pure Hugh's money. Because the TV contract paid for all the rest.
So as we head into 2025, you're in closure with WWE. You're gonna be back on TV a little bit. Before we go, how are you feeling about politics in the mid-2020s? Because you never really liked the two-party system, and you're a huge critic of it. That was really one of your pieces of your platform. Where are we now as we head into the mid-2020s?
Well, we're still part of the two-party dictatorship. I like to steal that term from my friend Ralph Nader. Ralph used that, the two-party dictatorship, because that's what it is. It's a two-party dictatorship. The only problem here, you want to know where I'm at? It's simple. It's real simple. I took an oath over 50 years ago. And I took this oath before I married my wife. And this summer, my wife and I are going to celebrate our 50th wedding anniversary.
Wow. Congrats.
Well, I'd like to proudly say, name me any other couple in wrestling who can now say they're going to celebrate their 50th wedding anniversary. Well, but I took this oath before I took an oath to her. And I honor my oaths, obviously, to her for 50 years now. And the oath I took before that was the oath to the Constitution of the United States of America. I took an oath to that Constitution. And unfortunately, January 6th, in my opinion, and I don't give a shit what anyone else says, I watched it, our Constitution was attacked and violated. And there was an attempted coup d'etat. And the people that did it, in my opinion, committed treason. And they should have been convicted for their treasonous activity of overrunning our capital and carrying a Confederate flag through my capital of the United States of America. They carried a Confederate flag, the Republicans, and they have not apologized for it, not one of them, and they still today have not apologized for it. And what did they do? They didn't get convicted for it, so they rallied up, and they now have taken the power and the control. So as far as I'm concerned, this country doesn't have a constitution anymore because the people in charge don't care about a constitution. They violated it already, and they'll violate it again as soon as they need to.
Oof. It's a tough way to end the convo, but I guess we're going to end it there.
Well,
please, not saying you're wrong.
Please correct me if I'm wrong.
I didn't say you were wrong.
No, I'm just saying that. And people may say I've sure got a narrow. Yeah, I do, because I took an oath to defend the Constitution of the United States of America, and I failed. And I don't like to fail. And let's remember something. I believe it was Ben Franklin said to us, "We've given you a republic if you can keep it." Well,
right.
I believe we lost it this year.
Jeez. Jesse Ventura, it was great to finally have you on the pod. Congrats on returning to the WWE. December 14th, Saturday night's main event. You're back.
Well, what you got today is just a sample.
I can't wait. Great to see you. I'm glad you're doing well.
Take care. Bye-bye.